Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well today. This time we are going to be looking at the book Before Shadowgate, and this is number 8 in the Worlds of Power books from Scholastic Books. And honestly, this is probably my favorite of the ones that I've read so far. When I first started reading this, I thought it was going to be like a prequel to Shadowgate, or something that was going to tie in like a little bit differently than what it was. It turns out that it is kind of a prequel, but it's also sort of a retelling of parts of the plot and kind of filling in some of the backstory, just in case you hadn't played Shadowgate before, which I'm just going to assume most of the kids that bought this probably didn't know what Shadowgate was and most likely hadn't played it before. Especially me. I really hadn't played Shadowgate before. I did not know about it on the computer when it was put out, and I didn't know about the NES game until I started, collecting video games. So, yeah, it was kind of fun to read this and then look up more of the story on Shadowgate and see exactly, how this book fit in. And I'm still just a little unsure as to how the book really fits in. I'm going to assume it's mostly a prequel, but I would really have to sit down and go through Shadowgate on my own to kind of dig into what's going on with it and everything. So if you have never played the game before and you don't know anything about Shadowgate, this is a fantasy story, which is pretty fun, at least for me. They didn't try to shoehorn anyone in to, be part of the story. There's no kid from our world to kind of anchor the things together. There's nothing like that, like you had seen with some of the previous books that I've read from the Worlds of Power or series, which is kind of a good thing. To kind of let you guys know, at the time of recording this, I've read Blaster Master, or no, Master Blaster. No, Blaster Master. The Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest book, and the Wizards and Warriors book. At least with Simon's Quest and Wizards and Warriors, Jesus, you see them take a kid and shove them into the game where they don't necessarily need to be, and it's either worked in very well, like it is with Castlevania 2, or it's worked in really bad, like it is with Wizards and Warriors. But we don't get that here. We get a little boy who's, I think he's like 16 or something. He's old enough to be a blacksmith apprentice, which I don't really know what the age requirement is in this world. But he's going to go on your basic hero's journey. This is something you've seen with Star Wars, you've seen it with The Lord of the Rings, you've seen it with a bunch of other things. A no-name kid from a backwater town suddenly is met by someone who happens to be, the great wizard or some wise mentor or something like that. They either give the kid a vision, which happens in this book, or they inform them that they're actually, the son of someone really important. Something happens where they have to go on this quest, and they gain a bunch of powers on the quest, learn how to use their new powers, and then use those to defeat some kind of a bad guy. That is a very brief explanation of everything that happens here. And with how short this book is, that's pretty much how quick it happens. this has a lot of the other fantasy tropes with it. So you're going to get elves, dwarves, you're going to see some magic, you're going to get some, unique characters in this where I had to look up what the hell they were, like what a fenling was, because I really didn't know. Apparently it's a variation of a dwarf. It does explain what the tie-in is, the Tyen. I'm not sure how you actually pronounce it, but it's basically a lion man, so like a were-lion or something like that, which was pretty cool, at least I thought. They do steal a few things, steal a few things from Lord of the Rings, where they don't have the ring wraiths, they have what are called death wraiths. They basically act the same way. They are trying to find our hero, whose name is Jaren, I think. I don't know exactly how to pronounce that. But they are trying to find him and stop him from becoming, the hero of this story. And they're destroying towns along their way, and it's kind of an interesting one. This is a more mature book than some of the others. You have, like, the fight scenes are a little bit explained. Well, they're explained a little bit more. Blood is brought up a lot more. There's more violence in this book than there was in the other three that I've read. Or at least violence against living things, because, they're shooting a lot of stuff in Blaster Master. Aaron progresses really fast in this. Like, he learns magic in like an afternoon, which was kind of shocking to see. He basically learns and kind of masters spells in an afternoon when he runs into Lakmar again. Lakmar is his, wise mentor in all of this. He then learns sword fighting in an afternoon when he runs into Hawk, and Hawk kind of gives him a few lessons and basically teaches him how to maintain his balance. And then Jaren just knows how to sword fight, and he proves all of this by fighting a black dragon, which they stumble across. And then he has a dream where... So let me talk a little bit about the dream. He falls asleep, which happens quite a bit in this book, and he has a dream of a barbarian, where he starts fighting the barbarian, and then this evil thing shows up, and he starts fighting the evil thing with the barbarian. And it's kind of like a Dragon Ball Z power-up type thing, where he magically learns how to master all of his powers that he's had. He learns how to be a better fighter in this dream. And then wakes up, and he's just an absolute badass now. I'm not sure how that worked, but hey, why not? And then he gets teleported to, like, the final battle. Or he gets teleported to near the final battle. They kill a bunch of harpies, and then he's basically carried to the last battle, which happens over the course of a few chapters, and so it's like 10 pages or so. And he ends up killing the big bad guy, or at least the big bad guy's buddy. And that wraps up the story. Things move very quickly in this, like they do in the other books. But it's still a fun and short story to read. I really did enjoy it. It was a little weird, but I would kind of expect that from a fantasy story. They're supposed to be kind of weird. So, yeah, it is... I'll get a lot more into this later, but it is a very interesting story, even if it is kind of leaning pretty heavily on some of the tropes of other fantasy stories. So the big differences between this story and the other three that I've read is this one is a much more mature story. There's more of a sense of danger to it than there is in some of the other books. You get the impression that he could die at pretty much any moment, especially early on, where he doesn't know anything and he's just goes off on his quest for no reason. Nobody's going to look for this kid because he's just an orphan boy that nobody really likes. And he is just very vulnerable for like the first half of the book. He doesn't know how to fight. He's afraid of everything. He's oftentimes paralyzed with fear. And he is generally just a danger to himself and the others around him when he starts off. There was also really no connection to video games in this one. Jaren is a part of this world. He came from this fantasy place. He did not get teleported there from, our world or a similar version of our world. He is just, a skinny kid who was working as a blacksmith and is an orphan and blah, 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 and just happens to be the king because, of course, he does. It's just very strange to see how this book took the story of Shadowgate and did something kind of special with it and didn't need to shoehorn in somebody from our world. There's also a lot more violence in this book. It's still very tame because it is a young adult's book, so you're not getting like graphic descriptions of what's going on and how these people are being killed or how these monsters are being killed. That is one thing I should say. It's still mostly monsters that are being killed. He does stumble across like a burned out village at one point, but they don't really go into like the death that probably took place there. They just talk about how the village was destroyed and all the men were taken off into slavery. They still go into, like, when it is not a human character, they still go into, like, how they're being hit, how they're being, struck with stuff, the fact that they're bleeding, the fact that there's a chance that these people are going to die, or the enemy's moving slower, that sort of thing, or they're writhing in pain on the ground, but it doesn't go into, anything too crazy when it gets into the violence. However, there are a number of battles in this. Most of them are small, but then there is a very large battle at the very end, where Jaren has just suddenly become a one-man army, and that was kind of weird for me. Like, he's taking a much more active role than some of the other main characters in the books, especially with like Wizards and Warriors and Simon's Quest, where the main characters don't, well, the main human characters don't really do too much. Here, Jaren does everything, and he is just laying waste to people left and right. He progresses very quickly as a warrior. It's kind of crazy. But just the way this book feels, or way it reads, just being a much more mature book, it kind of helps it stand out from the other Worlds of Power books that I've read so far. And I'm kind of looking forward to reading the rest of them now after reading this one. So my final thoughts are that this is a really fun book. I liked it a lot more than some of the other books that I've read, and I think this one does a much better job with its source material than a few of the other ones that I've read. This is only the fourth one, so I do have a bunch of other ones, but I think this one just kind of fits in a little bit more with the Halloween month, or at least with the month of October, because it's a little bit darker, it's a little scary at times, or at least it could be. I could see if I was a younger kid, I might be a little scared by it, even though it's probably nowhere near as scary as one of the Goosebump books, so you have some sort of a measuring stick for this. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you liked it or hated, I'd really love to know. Talk to you later. Bye.